Hello YouTube and hello community. Welcome back to this third installment in the series on Specialist Pathway. So if you're an IMG specialist and you're wondering how to go through that process in Australia, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Anthony. I am the Career Doctor. I help you manage your medical career here on YouTube. If you're liking my videos, leave me a like and a comment. And why not subscribe and turn on the notification bell? So this is part 3 in a 6-part series of videos about the specialist assessment pathway for becoming a specialist if you're a doctor trained in another country here in Australia. I'm assuming that anyone else has probably dropped off by now given that explanation, and we've really got the hardcore viewers who are wanting to know about this specialist pathway process. I'm amazed at the level of interest in this relatively obscure part of bureaucracy around the medical registration system in Australia, but I'm also pleased with the amount of support, and I know you guys have been hanging out for this, so I have been doing my best to get to it. These videos do take a little bit of research time, so apologies for being so late in doing this next one. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk a little bit initially about what the colleges actually are, because for some of you they're a bit of a foreign entity. They don't make sense. The process of becoming a specialist in your country is probably a little bit different, so there's a little bit of foreignness there. But then we're going to go into how you actually work out which college to approach, and I've got some helpful guides for you to help with that process too, because that's kind of one of the starting points and sticking points. You know, if you're a general surgeon, it's pretty obvious who you approach, but sometimes there are different sort of specialties where it may not be clear which college you go to. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then of course we're going to go into the college assessment, and I'm going to look at it from an in-practice example with a current community member who I'm working with around looking at going through that specialist pathway assessment as part of my consulting model, which is available to anyone who would like to know more about that. As always, the links will be in the description below, and I'll point you out to some excellent resources that we're developing to help you on the Advanced Med site. So let's dive in. Okay, so the first thing I just wanted to quickly remind you about is the Dr. Job Australia IMG support page. I think if you Google Dr. Job Australia, it will come up the first one on Google, or pretty much close to the top. So that's probably the easiest way of getting to that one. Bunch of resources there. You can see you can join the Facebook group, which we've got about 500 members now from that page. And that's a way of you asking questions about the process, and myself and others pop in there and try and help a little bit out that way. A little bit about the page. I've tried to collect all my videos there, so every time I do an IMG related video, stick it there to make it easy for you to find. Where you can find medical recruitment companies, the employment portals and registration links, so all the medical board links, AMC links, where to find all the job sites in Australia, including all the mega Victorian ones, because they're a little bit decentralized. And I think this is the thing that you'll probably be interested in today. I've actually collected all the links for the specialist colleges. So those links actually take you to the page on their site, except for the College of Sport and Exercise Physicians. I can't find that one, but for all of the rest of them, that last one goes to their homepage, by the way. For the rest of them, I've actually got the link to the actual page that you go to that starts you off in the process of finding out about the IMG assessment process. So that's all there for you, Dr. Job Australia. The next thing I wanted to show you is just this week, I've been working on a specialty guide. So a guide to the specialty medical colleges. So if you Google Advanced Med Specialty Guide, that should pop up, but I will, because it's fresh, leave a link in the description below for you as well. So this is going to be, it's a little bit of work left to go on, but going to be a comprehensive guide to the specialist medical colleges with lists and links included for you. So I talk a little bit about what a specialist medical college is, and I think that's important because our colleges are derived from the English system here in Australia. So if you're from a country that sort of derived its medical system from England, you'll be familiar with the role of a college, but a college can still be slightly different in, say, a place like the US versus Australia versus Canada, etc. Essentially, colleges are guilds or groups of members in an area of specialty expertise, and they look after the training of new members, and they support those members in the college to continue their professional development. So they're a bit slightly different from probably the other process that other countries have in terms of training people to be specialists, which is generally going through universities or other institutions, in that there's more of an apprenticeship model. So you're working under an expert and getting feedback. And then once you've completed the training, there's kind of a natural link into the college. You get asked to join the college, and that's where your continuing professional development starts off from. Whereas from a university perspective, it's more other teaching and learning methods. And, whilst you're always welcome to join the alumni when you're finished, there's no obligation to teach the next generation. There's no real obligation to participate in ongoing professional development. So that's basically what the colleges are. They came from the trade guilds in the 1500s. If you go to this page, you can read a little bit more about the history if you're interested in that. But I just wanted to cover that for you because some of you are a little bit unfamiliar with what a college is and why they are. As I said, you can go into a bit more depth on the blog site there. The colleges in Australia have a very powerful status. Arguably, they do a very good job in training up their members and developing their members, and they've been basically, by doing good stuff, been allowed to basically look after the trainees in the ongoing professional development of specialists. Things are changing. There is, of course, accreditation of the colleges. That's done by the Australian Medical Council, the same one that looks after things like the Standard Pathway Assessment, or the AMC certificate, part of the Standard Pathway Assessment. And there's a little bit more happening with the medical board in terms of things like continuing professional development and revalidation. But largely the colleges are still doing a lot of stuff in that space of postgraduate training and then continuing professional development. Now, depending on how you count them, and I've got a list here, there are 15 or 16 specialty medical colleges, and you can see I've listed the first one there, the Royal Australasian College of Physicians. So that's the first of many. Bit of information on each of these about how many members, what the post nominals are, the FRACP, etc. The 16th is the College of Dental Surgeons. Sometimes it gets included, sometimes not. I like to include it because some of the doctors who do facial-maxillary surgery, etc., they are trained through that college. So they're kind of both doctors and dentists, which is impressive, the amount of time you have to devote to that particular specialty. So the thing is, there are 16 colleges and they cover about 64 subspecialties and around 25 training programs. The tip here is, and we might just swing down to the bottom, is to work out where to start in terms of working out where your specialty might sit with a certain college. Now, it may be reasonably obvious from the description of the college. It may be less so obvious. And that might be your starting point. So, for example, if your field is within the surgical domain, you're likely, but not always, for example, the case of ophthalmic and dental surgeons would be an exclusion, you're likely to be covered by the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons. If you've worked generally for many years and are considered a specialist in your own country, but you've not done any certificates or formal training or whatever, you're actually unlikely to be considered a specialist in Australia. So you're probably looking at a different pathway there. If you can't work out where your particular specialty fits and it's not surgical related, it probably fits within the Royal Australasian College of Physicians. It is one of the biggest colleges. We'll just scroll up to the top here again. And it's definitely the most complex. There are about 37 training programs covered by the RACP. Some of that in conjunction with other colleges, most of it just done within the RACP. The two main areas of training are in adult medicine, of which there are a number of subspecialties, as well as pediatrics, which also have a number of subspecialties. But you can see here they also cover addiction medicine, palliative medicine, sexual health medicine, public health medicine, occupational medicine, and rehabilitation medicine. So probably the place to go if you're not clear where your particular specialty from another country fits. Other than perhaps if you've been working in family medicine, general practice, that's likely to be covered by either the College of GPs or the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine. They're the two colleges that look after general practice training in this country. So that's a guide to help you with working out what each college does and how to approach them. You'll find when we go into the example shortly that there are some costs involved in this process, and I think it's important to know about that. But you can generally ask a question of them and they will let you know if they are the right college for you, and that will be answered for free. But then when you get into the application process, it starts to cost you. So check that out, the specialty guide by Advanced Med, links in the description. Try Googling it as well. It should be on the front page of Google fairly shortly, I would think. Okay, so I mention that there will be an in-practice example for you, and here you go. So I've been working with one of the community members, as I said. He is a pathologist from China, and he would like to explore his options for working in Australia as a pathologist. And so he already knows that he needs to apply through the Royal College of Pathologists Australia. I believe he's interested in forensic pathology, and that may be the first issue, because that's quite a specialised area here in Australia, and there's not that many jobs that come up for forensic pathology, but there are like jobs. So here are the steps that he needs to go through in order to go through this process in terms of the college assessment. So firstly, as you remember from the initial videos, there's an AMC step. So the first step is to apply to the Australian Medical Council for portfolio and primary source verification. So you have to go to the AMC. We've got links. They'll be in the description here, and they'll be in the other videos. And you establish a portfolio. Now that alone costs you $500 Australian. You then they pass you on to what's called the EPIC site. That's the international group that reviews primary source verification documents. And if you haven't registered with them before, there's a registration fee of $125 US. And then for one qualification to be checked is a fee of $80 US. So what's that? It's probably 500 plus 200, about 800, maybe close to $900 Australian. You can convert that into your own country's currency. So that's the first bit. You've got to do that. And you probably want to start that early, because you can't then go to the colleges next. But it's a reasonably simple step. It maybe, depending on how difficult it might be in your country to be verified, it might take a few weeks, maybe a little bit longer for that to happen. Once that's been confirmed with the AMC, they let you know, and then you can go on to approach the colleges. Now, the colleges will not allow you to apply until I've seen that you've had that verification process occur. So while you're doing all that, you can actually do a little bit more work before you actually apply to the college. I think this makes sense. So the second step is to actually review the documentation on the college website in relation to specialist assessment. Now, they'll all be a little bit different, but because, and you remember in a previous video, I talked about how the medical board has stepped in and put some rules and oversight around this. They all have similar processes, and actually the information on the website is pretty good these days for most colleges. It's reasonably clear what you need to do and what the process is. So there are various forms you can look at. There's a guidance document. You'll see that here, and we're talking about the College of Pathologists in this example, so this will be different for other colleges. So here you go. Up front, they tell you what the fees are, also training fees, peer review fees. So that's if you need to be supervised. So there's a fair bit there to factor in, and I haven't actually got all of that on my notes. A bit about what happens if your application is deemed incomplete. You have to pay a bit more money to resubmit it. This is the recency of practice thing, so there's a guide about that, and they do assess you for recency of practice. Usually a couple of years is okay. Anything more than that becomes a bit of an issue. So there's a few other links there in terms of helping you. Some of the other colleges have a little bit more helpful documentation around this stuff. They also point out that you need to have your CV completed on a template that they provide. Now, normally I say don't complete the CV template, but that's for job applications. This is for college assessment. They do it in a specific way because they like to collect the information in that way and make sure give you a fair chance to provide that information. So just complete the CV the way they ask you to, okay? This is not about the 6 to 8 second review. Someone's going to go through this thoroughly for you, paying a lot of money for it. And of course, there's an English language proficiency. Again, that's another additional cost that you might have to go through. And if you're accepted into this supervision, there's additional costs when you're going through the process, and then obviously when you're being offered a fellowship, there are annual fellowship fees as well. A lot of that's tax deductible, by the way. It is tax deductible once you're working in Australia. So there's some guidance notes there. The other thing that I think is worth checking out, as I said, is the application and CV templates. So we'll have a look at them. So application forms actually fairly short. Most of them are. But then they want you to provide a whole lot of evidence. So there's a bit of guidance there. They talk a little bit about this issue of getting your documents verified in Australia. We would do that through a justice of the peace normally. There's what's called a statutory declaration. In other countries, there aren't justices of the peace that are available for doing this, so they give you a few options, and this will be for most of you. So a notary public, that's like a doctor, by the way. That's usually a good bet. And then a few sort of, the Australian Consul General, those sort of people. So there's a few options for you in each of your countries if you're overseas, and more in Australia. Then you fill in your sort of demographic details, who you are, where you're from, etc. That's pretty obvious. Here you see they're wanting to know your AMC number and your EECS number, and if you've got an USMLE. So they won't let you go past that if you do. And you've got to pay some money just to fill in this form and submit it, by the way. Then they want details of your primary medical qualification, your specialist qualifications, your exams, other qualifications, additional qualifications. Sometimes there's a name change that trips people up. So if your name's different to what's on in your medical degree to what's on your passport, that can be a bit of an issue, and usually you have to again clarify that through a statutory declaration process. They ask a few questions about whether you've been in trouble with your own registration board, and then there's a declaration that you've filled this in truthfully. And then finally, on the last page or two, there's a consent form. There's a bit for area of need if you are going down that path. We're not talking about that today, but then you see there's this checklist of a lot of stuff they want. So they want the application, they want the CV, they want a copy of your degrees, certificates of current good standing and specialist registration status. So this may take you a lot of time. So again, it's worth starting all this now while you're starting off the AMC process, because it could speed things up for you. And you've got to have all this in order to get to the next phase. And if they don't see what they need, they'll tell you it's not complete, and then they'll tell you to provide more stuff and you have to pay more money for it to be reviewed. So they'll just slow you up again. So that's the application form. We were going to look at the CV template, so we'll do that now. And just see what that looks like for you. So just expand that up. So you see here this is structured in a fairly common, boring, but still common format to collect all the content that you need. And I don't think we need to sort of go into this in much detail. I think the trick here though is to realise that you're probably going to want to add a lot more information than they leave boxes for, to establish that you've trained and got experience at the same level as what a specialist in pathology might do here in Australia. So some of these tabs like teaching experience, procedural skills, what else? Probably when we get to work history, employment history, that's going to take you a bit more time. And they give you a fair bit of scope here, but once you fill in that stuff, and particularly things like your duties, that's going to be important for you to just spell it out for them. So what I recommend doing is filling this out with the actual curriculum for the college and the training program alongside you, and sort of using the language of what the College of Pathologists use, or whatever college you're applying through, to fill in your application form and your CV if they require that. Now obviously it's got to be truthful, it's got to be honest, but if there's a certain term that might be different in your neck of the woods, your part of the world, but it's the same as what they were referring to, just make it easy, spill it out, use the terminology that the college uses. Yeah, so that's what the CV looks like, and again you have to verify that. The final thing that I think is useful to be looking at on the college website at this point is, as I said, the actual training requirements for a trainee in Australia. So they'll all be there. There'll be a fair bit of detail because they all want to recruit more trainees. Some of it will be paywalled, but that stuff is more about when you're in training. The stuff about what happens in training and the curriculum is usually public facing. You can find all that stuff. So you can see here that there's a whole lot of handbooks for various parts of or types of pathology training. So you can see the various subspecialties there. Some of these are some others that overlap with College of Physicians, by the way. And so you'd have to pick what area you're in. The community member is looking at forensic pathology, so there's a handbook there for what trainees do in forensic pathology, and you really just need to go through it, understand what happens, what sort of experiences are required, how many, if there's cases or workplace-based assessments or months of experience in a certain area, all that sort of stuff, and try and think about how that relates to your own formal training, how you were assessed, and then your experience post all that. And it's quite detailed, so we're not going to obviously go into all that today, but Each college will have something like that. So check out the curriculum document for the specialty or subspecialty that you're applying for and read through it thoroughly and think about and work out how your training and experience relates to that and how much of that you can demonstrate, because that's what they're going to be looking for. How similar is your training and experience to what is the training of whatever the specialty is, in this case a pathologist in Australia. I can't emphasise that too much. That's the standard, and that's what determines whether you're not comparable, partially comparable, or substantially comparable. And we'll get on to a little bit of information about that in a minute. So that's step 2. Now, the third step is to, well, before we do that, I would always recommend getting someone checking through your documents. Look, if you get it wrong, there's a bit of money, extra money for reassessing it here for $150, but you might as well try and get it right the first time. So the third step is to apply, and they will do a check of your application to make sure everything's in order, and they will let you know. And then there'll be a formal assessment of your process unless you need to provide more information. So at that point, the clock starts ticking, and the KPI that the medical board has set for all these colleges is to interview within 3 months, and that generally happens. So once you've been told that it's been accepted and under review, you can expect an initial outcome within 3 months, probably a little bit early because I've got to schedule an appointment to interview you. Not all colleges do interview, but most do. And so you're expecting to sit down and go through an interview with basically some members of the college. They have committees to review this, and they set up those committees to interview the applicants. So whilst you're waiting for that to happen, I've got a recommended step 3A for this community member. I recommend at this point you should be looking for jobs, because one of the things is just getting a special assessment is meaningless. You still have to, in the majority of cases, it's very rare that they just say you're completely comparable and you don't need some sort of peer review. So in the majority of cases, there will be a need for you to be put under supervision with a current fellow and reviewed for a period of time. It might be 3 months, it's more likely to be 12 months, and that's only if you're substantially comparable. If you're partially comparable, there's a lot more stuff you need to do, including usually examination. So you should be looking for jobs that are suitable for you. Now, the college has its own job listing board where you might be able to find jobs. Most of these will be actually for existing fellows and so won't be applicable, but you can look there. And you can see what's listed there at the moment. And of course, there are the other ways of looking for jobs, which I've done plenty of videos about, and we might put some links here or whatever to that. Don't contact any medical recruitment companies at this stage. Some won't even be interested in you if you've got the specialist assessment outcome, but none will be really interested until you've got that, unless you've been targeted for an area of need position, which is a different thing. So hold off on that aspect of looking for job search. Okay, so step 4 is to progress your application. As I said, you'll have approximately 2 to 3 months to prepare. It is now where it's worth investing in some interview coaching. It's a significant cost you're outlaying. You might as well invest a little bit more in terms of trying to get it right. Step 5 is to attend the interview, preferably in person. That's obviously going to cost a little bit more money. Again, if you're coming from another country, you'll be able to come in on a tourist visa generally for that sort of thing. This is your chance to clarify things. You put all your heart and soul into your application, you try to spell it out as much as possible, but there's always going to be some sort of gaps or points of clarification, and you can kind of clear it up in the minds of the panel. It's meant to be like what we call a fireside chat between peers, where they explore your training, your experience, and sort of size you up. And in my experience doing it for the College of Psychiatrists, it tends to be that way. But, you know, we're all humans, there are human factors, there's unconscious bias. There is also going to be this sort of sizing up assessment going on as well. And even if it's an unconscious process where people are thinking, is this person a good fit for the college? Are they like us, basically? So there are ways of preparing for that sort of scenario and making sure that you come off and give the right impression. Now look, if nothing else, practice. Find out the sort of questions that are asked. Practice talking about your CV, practice giving examples, so that you're prepared to talk when you get there to the interview. Now you can do the interview via video conference as well generally. They don't tend to like telephone, and I wouldn't recommend telephone. It's either in-person or video conference, which most people can cope with these days. And so then you do your interview, and then there's an outcome. That usually doesn't take too long after the interview because I've assessed everything else, and usually often contacted referees, etc. So step 6 is basically continue job search and wait the outcome of your assessment. Now, I get a lot of questions about what are the chances of me becoming X in Australia. And look, it's always individual and based on your own circumstances, and I'm only ever giving general advice. You should always find someone like me to talk to if you want to get proper advice and go through your situation in depth. But if we were to look at some of the information that's available publicly, particularly from the Medical Board of Australia, here's what we come up with this particular situation with the career doctor community members. So remember, they're in China and they want to do pathology. So we know from the 3 years of reports that the Medical Board have now been collecting from the colleges, we've got some data to go on now. 2015 data is not as useful, the 16 and 17 are a little bit better. We know from 16 and 17 there were 20 and 18 applications to the College of Pathology. Went through that, and unsurprisingly with those low numbers of applications, there weren't any Chinese pathologists applying to the college. In terms of the outcomes of the initial assessment, we're not talking about whether they progressed to specialists now, just the assessment through the application interview process. You can see here that of the applications to the RCPA, and it must have been in 2015 about 10, 3 were deemed non-comparable, 3 each year actually, 5 partially in 15, 14 in 2016 and 6 in 2017, and then 1 each in those years substantially comparable. So that gives you a bit of an indication about where you might land with that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I just went back and worked out it's 12 applications to the RCPA in 2015, and I just double checked because the numbers of substantially comparable were actually quite low compared to most other colleges, but it's true that only in all of those years only 1 person was deemed substantially comparable, which is the outcome that you want. That's usually just a period of peer review, whereas partially there's some examinations, assessments, takes a bit longer. It's not the worst thing, but you definitely want substantially comparable if you can. So that's the data on the College of Pathology. Now, if we look at the number of Chinese specialists applying in through the general process of special application, gives us another bit of information about how the country's training is generally accepted. No data for 2015, but in 2016 and 17 there were 9 specialists from China. This is good news for my friend. There were none deemed not comparable that went through the process. Bear in mind, some people withdraw early, so that sort of can skew the figures a little bit. 4 were deemed partially comparable and 5 substantially comparable in the specialty that they applied to. So that's good. There's a good chance, again, there from that indication. And this is interesting as well. There were 2 area of need applications in pathology in those years. 1 was accepted, 1 wasn't. So that gives you a little bit of an indication as to whether your specialty's in demand. So that also gives you a bit of an indication as to whether you might be able to get a job as well. So that's the summary that I put together for our community member. Hi there, Jerry, by the way. Thank you for agreeing to help out with this. So that's the summary of what we were covering today. Thank you to Jerry, our community member, who agreed to help out with the process of going through that sort of in-practice exam. I thought that was useful to go through. Now, for those of you who are going to ask me to do a video about surgery and a video about physicians and a video about psychiatry, I'm sorry, it's just not going to be possible for me to do 16 or even 64 different videos about what you need to do. That's just beyond my resources. We might do some follow-up things, some follow-up case studies as we go. It depends on whether you like this video and get behind it and support it. The more support I get for these sort of videos, the more likely I am to be able to do more of them, I guess. That's the way YouTube works. So, just to recap, check out the Advanced Med Specialty Guide. There will be links in the description below, but you might be able to Google it by now. I am available for any sort of coaching, consulting, CV assistance, interview prep should you need that. Otherwise, you can join our Facebook community or subscribe to the website where we've got lots of information for you. Check out the links in the description below. Like, comment, 50 likes and I'll do another one of these. Subscribe and turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next video.